What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
This is San Francisco.
Welcome back to San Francisco. Today's show is a recording from Salon HALA, which Mama Ganuush hosted at the Brava Theater in the Mission. And at the Salon were Jeremy Mack from the Phoenix Project, who was previously on to talk about tracking dark money in local politics, Keane Chukwuneta from Jobs with Justice, and Toby from Pups for Palestine, a group that you have got to love as people who want to sustain anarchist movements by merging their love for puppy play with love for Palestine and a genocide-free world. And I was also there to say some things, and the night ended up being a discussion of the limits of billionaires and their influence and all of the conservative money flooding elections in San Francisco. And it sort of continues the conversation about the energy suck that is voting, that the episode with Etsy Bets that I'll link in the show notes deals with. The Salon sold out, which is cool. Mama Ganuush and I are going to work on some more live events starting in the beginning of the year. We'll let you know when that happens at patreon.com/San Francisco, where you could also sign up to help support this project, San Francisco. Give Tofu and I a little tip over there. You'll also find all of the past 80-some episodes, as well as some content that is only available to members. If you become a member, we also have some little gifts like stickers, a copy of the book that I put out with Miss Major, the Black trans activist who spent many years in the Tenderloin and Oakland. What you're about to hear is Mama Ganuush hosting that live show.
It's really nice to come to the Salon because you have a lot of comrades that you know from a lot of different movements, like autonomous folks that, of course, like you won't call them out. You have like anarchists, you have abolitionists, you have like people from our JVP folks, our AROC folks. Like it's like a really beautiful thing that we have everybody from the movement here. So Toby, maybe let's start with y'all. Like the first question is like, what's top of mind for you?
Well, hi everyone. What's top of mind for me? So obviously it's hard not to be constantly thinking about the genocide. That's something that's always top of mind for me these days. Obviously we're in a really challenging political situation with a lot of big forces moving and things changing day to day. So I think all of us are asking the questions that everyone has come together to think about. What should we be doing in these moments? How does voting play a role in this? Where should our activism be directed? So those are questions that I've been asking myself, and I have more thoughts to share as we get into it, but that's top of mind for me.
Thank you so much for sharing. How about you, Jeremy? What's top of mind for you? I know you can't up that, but you know, you're welcome to share.
But yeah, by no means of comparison. Similar to what Toby was saying, I wake up every morning and watch Democracy Now! It's like from like the first thing, like I'm like brushing my teeth, watching Democracy Now! So shout out to Democracy Now!, KPFA. Really appreciated their reporting on the ongoing genocide, and it's like pretty much I recognize that for the last, since October, like every morning basically is me like immediately kind of watching what's happening over there, sitting with that as throughout the rest of my day and into my evening.
Amy Goodman is the boss.
Yes. Yeah, shout out to Amy. So that's part of it. I think on a local level here, I mean, we have a blog with the Phoenix Project. Also, I'm also the executive director of the Phoenix Project. That was part of, I did not remember to put that into my bio. It just was like, oh yeah, of course, but then other things. Just for context, we just had a blog post that came out yesterday on the Reboot 2024 conference that's happening in Fort Mason in September, that Gary Tan, local villain, really championing and drawing the connections between that and Project 2025 at the Heritage Foundation. So thinking a lot about the ways in which like we are living here, like, both here like in the United States and like in the seat of empire, but also like here specifically in San Francisco in the seat of a neo-fascist movement. So that's what's top of mind.
How about you? What about you, my dear? What's top of mind for you, Habibi?
Yeah, of course. Good evening, everyone. Of course, it's the same. I mean, I think we're all having that same experience, right? You wake up and you read news about the genocide. And that's, I don't know, it's been such an emotionally disorienting thing and way to start your day. Very much that. first and foremost, like I am Nigerian. And so I'm always thinking about the impacts of like imperialism, neocolonialism. And there are like clear connections between that we act as if it's abroad, but it's really here, right? It's techniques that are effectively refined abroad and then brought home. And so Jeremy and I talk all the time about what this neo-fascist movement is here, what their plans are, how it touches the ground here. And I think right now, the parts of the left that I'm in touch with are trying to figure out how they're going to respond. In many steps, they might even be a step or two before, in that they are starting to understand the scope and scale of the problem. And so the question that's always at the top of my mind is, what does it look to take sort of the research that we do, and then from there to organize people and institutions around a sort of a shared vision of what it means to push like a proactive vision to combat all of this, because otherwise we're going to be playing defense for forever, and that's terrifying. So
thank you for sharing this, and also like having an action, right? Like an action to do, or a tangible action for people. That's a big deal. Toshi, what about you?
Yeah, I'm not going to be very creative in terms of the genocide is very top of mind. And in particular, yeah, like its interconnectedness to so many other movements that we're all a part of. Thinking about how yesterday I found out that Zionists are going to be considered like a protected class at NYU.
Oh no.
And
of course it would be.
just, yeah, like with gender and race. Yeah, we're in like a very weird moment where repression is unlike anything that I have gone through. But something that I really value is we do live in the Bay, and there are so many people here who have been doing this work for so long. And so people like, I think Deej and Tori are here, like some mentors that have been doing this kind of, yeah, totally. With Queers Undermining Israeli Terrorism, I also have some comrades from Gay Shame here as well. And the other thing is that finding hope in that people have been here and doing the work for a long time. And we are particularly blessed to be here in the Bay, where there's already this activist infrastructure that exists. And yeah, I feel very fortunate about that.
Hello everyone, Tofu here, co-producer and editor of the show. Just butting in real quick to let you know that the audio from this live taping of the Salon back in August couldn't be fully recovered. So if you were at the live show, you might notice some parts aren't included. I apologize for that, but I hope you can still enjoy the episode regardless of the post-production problems. Anyways, follow all of our socials and subscribe to the Patreon if you're able to. Links in the show notes /description. And now, back to the episode.
I mean, talking about the subject today, let's dive in. And maybe I want to start actually with this, like with the Phoenix Project experts. Maybe a good point, maybe Keane, to drop in what is the Phoenix Project and how can people have access to that? And then maybe follow through the question of today's topic, like, do people have power? Yes or no? And if yes or no, why and how?
The Phoenix Project is a nonprofit that tracks a dark money network of nonprofits funded by billionaires. Many of us know these nonprofits: Grow SF, Together SF, Vibrant SF, Abundant SF, Big SF, all that stuff. Just trying to track not only the money that they're bringing in, like where it's coming from, but what exactly the objectives are of these folks. And I think that's a pretty succinct way of saying it, but I'll give you an opportunity, Jeremy, to add to that.
That's the generalness of it. I would say that like one thing that's just important to think about is that like essentially there's been a movement since 2020 to create like a parallel political ecosystem. So like take all of the like organizing that's happened in San Francisco, the different like grassroots organizing groups that have been really important in like, you know, shaping and winning progressive issues for the last, 10, 15 years. And then you also had like, right wing that was really big money backed. And essentially like you have these groups that have come out of pretty much like sprung out of nowhere, like integrated with tech venture capitalist billionaires and corporate real estate billionaires that have come together to say, hey, we need to create a new right wing in the city, and doing that through creating like mirror images of like shadow cells of the progressive organizing groups. So to like take what they can learn from the progressives and like how they were winning campaigns in the 20 teens and like use their same strategies, but like have them like be super corporate, top down, run by CEOs, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and just being incredibly well invested. And then like with that coming also like shaping narrative through the media ecosystem, creating a whole new newspaper, SF Standard, that's an extension of one of these organizations. Yeah, and just like essentially creating these like political juggernauts that at this point now are the most highly funded political organizations in the city and are sweeping elections the last 2 years. So that's who we're tracking, and was kind of like, oh, like there's not enough attention being paid to this, in our opinion. And also, they make themselves really hard to do research on because they do a lot of like really deliberate obfuscation of like their tax records and their filings and like who they are and who's behind them. So it's hard for reporters. So it's like, you know, to give some respect to like, to, you know, reporters in the city, they make it really hard to track them if you're not like spending all of your time like in the back room with like the cork board, like making the connections. Yeah, so it's a meme. But yeah, so that's how we emerged, and we have a couple of papers online, Phoenix Papers Volume 1 and 2. We have a third volume that's coming out kind of like the end of September. We're not quite in September yet. So yeah, so that's, I guess, the wrap up on the general gist of what we're doing.
And then to answer the second question, like, do we have power? The answer is yes, or rather potential for power, right? As long as we have people, we have power. I mean, that sounds kind of like a little cheesy, and it is in truth. But other folks can throw $17 million at nonprofits, but we have our relationships, right? We have our relationships to others in our workplaces, in our families, in our groups of friends. We were talking about colonialism, imperialism. A big source of our power is the fact that we are here, right, in the belly of the beast. We have access to information and other things that folks in other parts of the world really struggle. It's really easy in this moment to feel disempowered. And as somebody who's done like, you know, professional organizing for a while, yeah, sometimes it can feel like there's a real separation of politics from the self. And one thing that I like to hold on to, and it's kind of funny, and I was talking to somebody the other day about my partner, Shannon. Her expression of politics is different than my own. Mine is like professional and organizing, working with labor unions and community groups, things like that. And Shannon's is like very personal. It's like in the way that she takes care of her neighbors, or if her friends are having a hard time, they know that her house is a place that she can go to. But it's still expression, it's just different expressions of that same love that we have for people. And I think it's really important for us to hold on to that. They can have billions of dollars and buy the Democratic Party, but we are the ground on which the Democratic Party sits. And like, we'll always have more power than them. It's just a matter of our ability to connect with one another and make use of it.
And thank you for sharing this. And I'm curious, just a quick follow-up question, and not too tricky or anything at all. How bad is it? Like, how bad is it?
Yeah, okay. So I was explaining I have a good friend who lives in Colombia, and we speak every week, and they're doing cool organizing down there. I was trying to explain to them today the scale of what's happening here. And this is a person who's worked in Democratic campaigns here in the US. That's where we met. And for the first time in like years, I found myself getting frustrated with this person, because they were like, yeah, we can just keep doing like, you know, autonomous stuff and, you know, And I'm like, yes, trust me, in my heart, I absolutely believe in that. But these people just for 4 years have like ran the field on us. Like you don't see the scale, how much money they're throwing at like DCCC elections, how much money they're throwing at these recall elections, how much money, like, I mean, when I first moved to the Bay 6 years ago, I'm a baby, I know it. And that was a year before Chesa got elected. So I came at the high water mark. I thought we were just going to be charging on an escalator to utopia and it was going to be great. And the speed with which that has been undone is scarier than anything I've seen in my life. Because 5 years before I moved here, I was working in like, you know, congressional campaigns, running across the country, doing that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's like a speed and centralization within these nonprofits, both on the C3 and the C4 side, where they scream all year about homelessness and crime and drug abuse and then turn that into a campaign thing that they used to just wipe everybody who you might like in office out of power. And it's very effective and it's very coordinated and it's new. And because it's new, it's scary. So to answer your question, I think it's quite bad potentially, but we are in a good position where there's a lot of infrastructure around, both in the community in terms of people who have been doing this work, I would say in and outside of institutions for a very long time. Their wave hasn't, I don't think it has actually hit its peak. So a lot of the infrastructure that if we don't do anything might not be here or be as strong in 5 years, 10 years, is still here and can be utilized if we're quick enough to figure out like some interventions. So I'm terrified. This is all I think about. Literally ask my partner. I don't know, like how can you be a human being if you're not hopeful, right? So yeah, that's always got to believe that you can figure it out. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Jeremy, I'm curious, so like same question, do people have power or not? And I'm also curious if you have any reflections on what we just have been dropped right now. And I'm curious also if you have any outs.
Any outs?
Like what would be a potential out looks like with the infrastructure that we have? Like I'm curious. But yeah, it's up to you. I'm sorry, this is like a lot of questions with each other, but I'm curious, it's like this one reflects to the people's power, whether people have power or not.
Totally.
I'm just curious, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'll do the best with it that I can. One way of answering this question, I think big picture, I could say there's a lot that I do not know, and I'm not quite sure on in terms of like the degree of power that we have. One thing that's been illuminating to me watching like this corporate billionaire right-wing takeover of the city and the spending that they've been doing to make that possible is like they really, really care about our vote. Like they're spending all this money specifically on like elections, like $40 million plus over the last 4 years to get their people elected, to get their referendums and campaigns like passed, and to get rid of certain people from office because they represent a threat to them and to their financial interests. And it's like, I don't know, from like a urban planning perspective, like I think of it as like they have this like make gentrification great again agenda, and it does require a level because of like the you can talk about how much of a democracy we live in, but because of the democracy model that we have, like they require winning elections in order to like give the stamp to allow them to do the things that they want to do, which ultimately like results in lining their pockets, like ultimately results in them becoming wealthier through policies that they're passing. They'll have their like culture war by trying to like fearmonger around crime or houselessness or drugs, but then it's classic Republican playbook, but then turn around and like the policies they actually pass are ones that create deregulation, lower their tax rates, allow for like upzoning to create more luxury condos, and just make more money. Also, like working towards enacting like a citywide charter school program. That's a thing that we can talk about later. I say that to say like it's almost like by looking at the shadow, can I see how like important our power is? Because even if I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I don't feel like I have much power and I'm not that important, or like what we're organizing for, at least like within like questions around voting, especially of like, oh, like does it even matter if I vote or who I vote for? It's still going to show up the same way. I see the way that like they think that I have power. They think that like our vote has a lot of power, and they're willing to spend like more money than God, to make that happen and to enact their agenda. And so I'm like, okay, I guess we do have some power here because they're scared of it.
I'm curious then, just because you mentioned the schools and charter schools for a minute, and I know that right now a lot of anti-Zionist comrades are taking it like a very tough route with the school districts. It's been like an uphill battle. And I'm curious if there's any connection between both. I'm curious if the same people behind the charter schools are the same people who are trying to like go after any form of expression of Palestinian solidarity and any show of anti-Zionism in like any sort of education, you know what I mean? Like I'm curious if it's the same funding. Or if you guys didn't approach that before, I'm just curious if that would be something to consider looking into.
I think it's absolutely a worthwhile avenue to look into. It's not one that we specifically looked into, so I don't have like numbers or details to be able to talk about it effectively. But it's a good lead, and I'd love to follow up and talk more about it.
And it's just curiosity, and also shout out to the school, like what's happening right now across the school districts. And if any need to know more information, there's ELT for Palestine, and there is also Anti-Zionist Jewish Network. Their resources they cover a lot of this.
Yeah, I know what I can't say, but from what I can say is that, like, so Neighbors for a Better San Francisco, which is like, so it's like if there's 3 organizations you need to know in this like AstroTurf network and this like fake grassroots billionaire-backed right-wing organizing that's happening.
Many, basically.
Yeah, well, I would say that connections with Manny's and Manny, you could tell.
The Manny's of the time.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so like the 3 that you need to know are Neighbors for a Better San Francisco, Together SF, and Grow SF. Those are like the big 3. And then there's like the overall network's like 35 different groups that are, at different levels, but they're basically like all funded and like lead back to like these 3. And of that, Neighbors is the most powerful. They're the most background group. They're most in the background. They kind of operate like a foundation behind the rest of the groups. Like they fund a lot of the other groups. And like Neighbors for a Better San Francisco, names like that, it's like fuck you. Neighbors for a Better San Francisco.
Toshio call it like old school names, basically. I don't want to say boomer name. It's like very insulting, but
it's just like I just wish they could call themselves like fascists to take over San Francisco. Like it's like make it obvious. Like like yeah, they're bad guys. But like so on that board, like on their board of directors, like of folks calling the shots, like they have basically like it's almost all venture capitalists. And almost all of them are billionaires, and their connection between each other is that they almost all of them are huge charter school advocates on the national level and local level, starting with the president and director of Neighbors for Better San Francisco, William Obendorf, who, big boo, and big on the recall effort, absolutely. And he's one of the biggest funders of Neighbors. He also took over Betsy DeVos's role as the president of the American Federation for Children, which is a national charter school movement. He's also like one of California's biggest like right-wing mega donors. And so he brought in his friends, Arthur Patterson, who's OG venture capitalist, and his wife, Louise Mulfield Patterson. They're husband and wife duo. They're both on the board. And Louise is a huge charter school advocate. She's connected with Aspire. Aspire Public Schools. Yeah, Aspire Public Schools. Yeah, so like she's connected to them. Also, Stephen Merrill, who's another one of the people on their board, also similar venture capitalist, billionaire, huge in the charter school, like big supporter of the charter school movement. So they have that going consistently for them. Like it's like, oh, like what brings you these group of people all together for Neighbors? Charter schools.
I'm talking about children and charter schools and of course like all these like tech billionaires and a lot of people like new tech rich in the city. I'm so glad that we have Toby, because Toby have been doing a lot of research around like tech fascism. Tech fascism and Zionism, it's really cute. It's like everything is so related with each other. And I'm curious, question that we talked about, like what do you think, people have power or not? And also given also the context of what you shared about the English, it's like feels like colonization and imperialism is all about money, where they want to make sure that their schools is the schools they want, the neighborhoods you want. Travels Chandra was talking about buildings for shade because he wants to walk in shade. Yeah. It's some crazy shit. So I'm curious about your thoughts.
I think what Keane had said about different sort of styles of political engagement and priority was a really great launching point for this, right? So just a little bit of background about myself and the way in which I'm paying attention to these things. I think more of the style of punk, anarchist, DIY takes on this stuff. I think most of my kin are the weirdos and the anarchists and whatnot. So I'm not necessarily, doing the same kind of political research that, the Phoenix Project is doing, but we are paying, very close attention to very similar things. So, I'll give a little bit of background on what I've been paying attention to. And if you want to learn more, we have zines over there. One of my collective projects with my friends is Zine Dog. So lots of topics that you've talked about at your previous salons about some of the associations of Zionist culture at Burning Man, some of these figures we've talked about. We've got tons of great stuff. So, and also, if our zines run out, zinedogs.com is a great place to read about this. But
And the zine is right here by the very cute puppy. She's right there. Yes.
yeah.
Quit and gay shame scenes, gay shame and quit zines and stickers are upstairs.
Yeah. So one of my pet projects and things I've been paying attention to, we have a great zine over there that we just came out with. The cover is this sort of terrifying AI-generated image. It says, "Where are the grandparents?" Right? And this is a parody where if you actually open it up, you see the actual posters that were put up around Hayes Valley that were reported on in a number of magazines, being like, what is going on here? It's a different AI-generated image that's supposed to be a call to action to, don't you care about San Francisco? What are we going to do about all of our problems that they seem to think are obvious, right? So similar to what the Phoenix Project has been looking at, there's a large amount of money flowing through a lot of different organizations, and particularly, I think we're familiar with people like Elon Musk and probably Gary Tan and a lot of the individuals highlighted in the Phoenix Project. I think one of the key figures at the center of a lot of this is a person called Balaji, who has this concept called the network state, right? And he's the person who has really been calling to this idea of tech Zionism as a thing, right? So in his view, there is an underlying cultural force that tech needs to promote in the world, right? A sort of deregulation, a type of freedom of speech. I mean, we've seen, probably Elon Musk say very, very similar things, right? I think we have a flavor of what this is, right? And so part of his philosophy and the way that this has materialized in a number of different projects has been to look at the example of Israel settling in Palestine, right? And saying, these were thinkers beforehand who developed the philosophy of Zionism, who went from being scholars into being, farmers and soldiers, and had to do this sort of like cultural transformation, figure out how they're going to take land sort of piecemeal, right? And so Balaji promotes this, and there's a number of projects, including the one that was promoted with those flyers in Hayes Valley called City Campus. That was, again, I think, mocked by basically everybody who covered it because it was just so ridiculous. But a lot of very strange global projects on how to essentially colonize from tech culture into different places. There's this ridiculous special economic zone in Honduras that is currently in a huge lawsuit with the state of Honduras over contracts and fights for land, and lots of examples I can talk more about if you're interested.
So Toby, can you share with us a little bit more about how do you say his name again? Balaji?
Balaji, yes.
Balaji. It sounds like this like mob, like 1950s, like made up villains. It's like very, very comic booky. Can you share how he's doing this? Like is it through, for example, incubators? Is it through like hedge funds? Like how is he doing that?
Yeah, and maybe to dovetail to the question of, do we have power? I think power is really relative, right? And I do think that we have a lot of collective political power, and simultaneously, I don't have $17 million to throw to advance my ideals, right? I think we have, in some important ways, less power that we need to recognize and mourn and figure out what to do with, right? So Balaji is a former CTO of Coinbase. He has lots of other,
got it.
Yes, made a lot of money, obviously, from crypto as well as from his tech escapades. But yeah, from this, he's able to throw money at conferences where he invites a lot of people to come, everyone who's involved in crypto, all that scene, a lot of big tech money. JD Vance is a person who's also a part of these circles, the sort of VC funding. So
it's the Binance guy, right? JD Vance.
Was he involved in Binance? Does anyone know? JD Vance is currently running for vice president of the United States.
Oh, God.
Peter Thiel's company.
She's so messed out.
He's Peter Thiel's mentee.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's the same sort of cast of characters, right? But some of these people have projects like, what if I started a special economic zone in Honduras? Some people are like, what if we tried to take over Hayes Valley? Some people are like, there's all sorts of other projects.
What if we decide to
examples.
live forever and never die?
Yeah, all sorts of things that are. It just sound completely absurd, right? So there's lots of great places where you can read about this. I think Gil Duran is a journalist who's writing about this.
Yeah, shout out to Gil Duran. Gil Duran's been covering this really, really well. Writer with the New Republic. Also has a blog called The Nerd Reich. Reich like the Third Reich. And yeah, and he's been doing just like awesome, and I say awesome, it's terrifying, but like really good in-depth reporting exactly on what Toby's been talking about here with like the network state and the connections there between the figureheads behind it. So
Yeah. And I'll say, for me, the sort of new fascist edge that really underlines all of this and why this is particularly terrifying for me, I think obviously we're probably all sharing in a sense of dread of, another potential Trump presidency and what that means for all sorts of minorities, right? And I think we see in people like J.D. Vance a particular focus on the family, right? And this is something that we're also seeing, again, from city campus, being like, where are the grandparents? Like, why isn't there traditional family values in San Francisco, right? And it is this advance of who their people are that need to be empowered, how the sort of mechanisms of gentrification are going to happen. And as a queer person living in San Francisco with a lot of people suffering from housing instability, having these people say, I want to take over your neighborhoods, right? They literally have a map of Soma, for instance, being like, we need to put all of our headquarters there. That's terrifying, right?
Follow up on this. One of the key things when he talked about Coinbase, there is another company called Binance, which is the biggest, one of the biggest crypto Bitcoin owners of the world. And the guy sounds like the VP. At this point, I am personally don't believe in voting for Democrats. I don't even know who the nominee for the VP anymore. I don't follow. I focus on this more. But one of the things that was interesting is because Binance have been upholding Palestinian money. There is millions of dollars in crypto because Palestinians, crypto, one of the things that people use crypto is to move money in a time of a genocide. And Binance have been upholding this. So it's interesting to hear Chris Larson is a crypto billionaire. Douchebag is the Coinbase person is a crypto billionaire. So there's a lot of connection of how they're actually targeting Palestinians in a tangible way. So it's insane how connected this is.
Totally, and I think for me, it's especially as someone who has sort of anarchist leanings, there's a part of me that is drawn to some of these projects of being like, how do we imagine a different world? And I think something like crypto on the surface has the promise of potential detachment from state regulations, that kind of stuff. But you see in practice how these values actually come into being. When Elon Musk takes over Twitter, it's no longer a free speech zone. It's him promoting right-wing voices and suppressing left-wing voices, right? When crypto ends up being a thing, yes, the Binance, I believe seized assets of a lot of Palestinians who were on a suspected terror list or whatever. There's a huge cultural bias to this. It's not a objective, we don't want any politics in this. It is, no, these billionaires are going for a particular political goal, right?
And actually that brings us back to our next point and our last question, basically. So far what we have heard is that it's really difficult. We've never seen this amount of money to turn things into very conservative politics, to take over San Francisco upside down for corporate interests that includes Zionists. It seems like a lot of the players are similar to the impact that we're seeing in the city, but in different sort of sects, nonprofits and crypto and others. What would be going into a year of harassment by Kamala Harris campaign to vote for her, and a lot of voting and a lot of discussions in progressive spaces about voting and other things? What do you think will be the key thing somebody want to focus on that would be helpful? What are you focusing on going into this voting? And what would be one thing that you would say okay, this is how I'm going to contribute, and this is how I feel like I am doing something. I'm not just feeling so dismissed and disempowered, and I don't know exactly what to do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, after 10 months of the most recent ramped up genocide, how do we keep going? And it's really inspiring to hear that people are already on campuses trying to fight things like the mask bans and the encampment bans, whether or not these policies about, Zionism becoming a protected class are in place. People are going to continue to doing what they do because this is an emergency. It continues to be an emergency, but I'm also thinking about how do we keep it sustainable long term, because after the last encampments came down just before the summer, there was a sense that I had and some friends had that people were feeling exhausted. And so I I feel like it takes like thinking of creative things like this. Thank you, Mama Ganuush, for hosting this event to keep people's eyes on the all-important topic at hand. That's going to be I would like to say that it's going to be done by the time November rolls around, but pretty sure that that's not going to happen. So if my wishes don't come true, I do think it's important that we continue to just figure out ways around the system. If you vote, that's cool. I don't necessarily think that electoralism is where we should be spending so much of our energy, just because, for many reasons, I identify as an anarchist, and I think that we see so many resources, so much money going into these elections, and it can feel so overwhelming, and it can feel like I don't want to do anything. Like it leads me personally to apathy, to think about working on the next campaign after November. I do think, it's these alternative ways of fighting against this system that we know is not working for most of us in many ways, and where power continues to be concentrated in the hands of a few people. How do we do it in creative ways that sustains these movements long term?
Thank you, Toshi. Who would like to go after?
I'll go. It's interesting because Jeremy and I were walking around, and it's funny, like I spent literally like 4 or 5 years of my life trying to get people elected, and now I'm like, I think you just sort of have to place elections in their proper context. The way I look at it is it's a measure of our power at a specific point in time within a specific context, right? And if used in a way that's like strategic, it can open up space for us, like in new regulatory environments that allow us to do cool creative stuff. Am I allowed to mention candidates? I don't know. Yeah. Okay, cool. It's like imagine like you had 3 Jackie Fielders on the board of supervisors who care a lot about public banking, right? Well, then that means that if you're able to pass a law that allows for public banking, you can like radically democratize like development of like land in the city. Like these are like things that can happen, like real spaces that get opened up. Actually, a more concrete example is you passed the tenants' right to organize in San Francisco last year before, and now all of a sudden you have these tenants unions popping up across the city on rent strike, challenging landlords, saying we're not going to pay you until you recognize the power that we've organized within this space. So as long as like electoral stuff is like, again, contextualized, and they're part of like a wider strategy, I don't actually see an issue with it. I think the problem is when we are told that it's the only expression of politics, when we're told that this is the way, this is how you stop fascism, is by jumping on the Kamala Harris vibes train, and it's like, no, I don't want to, because I know what that means. And I think it's just, you have to think of it as a tool, and you have to think of it as a tool that's part of like a wider strategy. Otherwise, you just get lost. And I don't think we have the option to waste time that way, because a lot of lives are on the line.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sighing because it's like heavy. It's real. I feel like people lived through this in the 30s and the 40s, and they didn't realize what they're going into, but like this is just happening right now. Any thoughts, Jeremy, Toby?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. I think I want to give like a special shout out to Toshio on stage here in San Francisco. Really. And the reason why, amongst many reasons, is that like I think it's really important to have like spaces where like for media, for spaces like the salons that Mama Ganuush is hosting, such as tonight. Opportunities for us to be able to be in conversation with each other and share understanding, share wisdom, share insight into what's happening around us. Because it's really discombobulating. Like if I didn't follow money and politics very specifically like this in San Francisco, I would have no fucking idea of what's going on. And shout out to Mission Local, because they actually, while we're doing the shout outs, Giovanna Barros, Kelly Waldron, they're doing a really great job also really tracking the money and being like, hey, this is important, check this out. But like it takes people really caring, and then taking that care and sharing with the people that also that they think, hey, this is important, and then having people like listen and internalize it and have that impact their worldview, have that impact their understanding of what's happening. And then people have their own ingenious ways that they're then able, with their own skills, that they then turn around and get involved and show, like, use that analysis to make arts, or to integrate into their schools, or to have, bring into the spaces that they occupy. So I think there's just like such incredible multivarious ways that people are able to plug in and support one another and move visions, use visions to move mountains in ways that is possible through spaces like these, through podcasts like Sad Francisco, hitting you with this every day. Every time I listen to it, it's like, oh my God, this is crazy. How did I not know about this? And now that I'm aware, what can I now do to push against this, or at least talk about it and bring awareness to it. So that gives me a lot of hope. So, yeah.
And just one reflection on this is because we don't waste time on MSNBC, on Rachel Maddow getting angry and then sending texts to your friends to forget about Palestine and vote for Kamala. You really focus on spending time and doing content, doing community work. That's what it means to really remove yourself from the effort invested in the voting cycle into community stuff and things that meaningful. So, and Toby, you talk about meaningful stuff, yeah.
Sure, yeah, meaningful stuff.
Oh, no, I mean, sorry. Same question, I apologize if we missed it. And of course, feel free to reflect on anything that we have shared, or also anything else that you feel would be one thing to come out of this and focus on going into this year.
Totally, yeah. No, I totally vibe with, I think there is a lot of energy that gets sucked up by electoral politics for sure, right? And I see people's energy get sucked up by all sorts of things, right? I see people who want to make change in the world who end up getting, co-opted into doing a lot of work for, nonprofits and, certain things where perhaps they have some ambition of making things better, but also, it's very formulaic on you're very limited in the impact you're going to have with that. So I think we need more people out there figuring out what they can do for their local communities, what they can do to bring their perspectives into the world, how they can help outside of the totality of the capitalist world that we've constructed around us, right? And simultaneously, I do think who's in office matters, right? We talked a little bit about the hope of the Chesa Bodine era, right? Who's the district attorney matters, right? How the Golden Gate Bridge protesters are treated and whether they're charged, that is a factor of who's the DA. How homeless people are treated on the street, that's a factor of who's the supervisor and who's the mayor. So I am going to vote. I'm going to send in a ballot for sure. But I think you have to approach each of these things with your own set of values and perspectives for sure.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I would love to open it up. We have this community is incredible. I see so much incredible people. One last thing. Toshio, name a villain, a local villain that we all need to know about. Yeah. First one, top of mind. Local villain.
I think Gary Tan.
Tan
is the first one that comes to mind.
Awful.
Yeah.
Same question. Name a villain.
Oh, wow.
If it's actually, sorry, that's a question I just dropped you on. You don't have to name a villain, but if there's someone in brain, a villain or legislation that's coming ahead.
Yeah. Policy stuff really isn't my jam, but I'll just go with one where it's I'll just say Scott Wiener.
Oh God, yeah.
Because I don't know. We were talking about it in the back. He's very intelligent. He's very patient, and that scares me because patient people in politics who can put their emotions aside and see the long game.
Yeah, terrifying.
Those are the ones you need to track.
Yeah, he scares Nancy Pelosi. Imagine this.
Yeah.
Villain. Name a villain.
Name a villain. I won't call them objectively a evil person or I don't want to dehumanize this human. And also I've consistently been tracking and very keyed into the movements of Mary Jung. She's a very, very important player in the behind the scenes of the political vision for she co-founded Neighbors for a Better San Francisco.
Oh God.
She's a director of San Francisco Association of Realtors.
Wow.
Which is the corporate real estate lobby in San Francisco. She was the driving force behind the Democrats for Change slate that took over the Democratic Party in March. What else? She also, like Jay Chang, who's the director of Neighbors for Better San Francisco, also a rapist, and also known as Jesse Chang. Was accused of rape, because I know it's being recorded, so I don't want to be caught for libel. But he's a protege of Mary Jung, and was got his first job driving for Ed Lee from her connection. So she's a power player, like a super power player, and stays very behind the scenes.
That's terrifying.
And it's a name that I'm through our next Phoenix papers, which hopefully end of next month should be available for free download. Have a little special on her and trying to get people just aware of her, what she's up to, and how she's pulling a lot of strings behind the scenes.
Well, I can't wait to hear that. Thank you so much for doing all the research. Also, thank you very much for this. Toby, you're a villain, or in a comic book way. So.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to answer this question in two ways. The first one being that my dream is of a world where there aren't villains, and we can persuade people to see the world in the way that we see it and to care about each other, and hopefully we don't have to think about the world as heroes versus villains. That being said, acknowledging the power balances in the world and who I feel is an opponent to my dreams of prosperity, I'm going to name the supervisors Dorsey and Mandelman, who are voted against the ceasefire measure, represent predominantly, gay districts, Soma and the Castro, and I think have reflected to me a real worry that gay politics has been heavily de-radicalized. And this is much to say. Go read my zines.
Well, thank you very much. I actually, I have a lot of villains, but it's okay. Yeah, today.
Name one.
It's okay if it's Toshio.
I'm really very scared of Scott Wiener. I'm really scared of him. This person has so much influence and have so much power, and he's just a sociopath. It's like incredible who he is.
Thank you for listening to Sad Francisco. I am Toshio Meronek, and my co-producer is Tofu Estolas. Patreon.com/SadFrancisco is where you can find our past episodes and transcripts, and it's also where you can help us out with a donation. And if you do, it comes with some benefits like getting the episodes a few days early, and our gratitude for allowing us to keep making this podcast, which we love to do. See you next time in Sad Francisco.